The topic I chose for my final paper and presentation is the impacts of global warming on Native peoples of Alaska. There are a few reasons why I chose this topic. First of all, my interest in global warming, I think, spurred from growing up in interior Alaska in the land of permafrost. Secondly, I work for a firm that provides design and construction management services to many villages across Alaska that we've read about. We have worked in Shishmaref, Kivalina, and Newtok, just to name a few. We have helped construct rock revetment seawalls intended to provide erosion protection while some of these communities relocate. They say that pictures speak louder than words, and I feel the photos I chose for this presentation convey the impacts of global warming far better than any speech could. I have personally seen the impacts of global warming in some villages and have even spoken with various people from some of these communities about it and their ongoing relocation efforts. The impacts of global warming are upon us here in Alaska. It's happening right now. My presentation focuses on various ways global warming has impacted the lives of Native peoples of Alaska, especially those who live in the Arctic zone along the northern and western coast of Alaska from Bristol Bay to the Canadian border. I explored both the underlying causes and effects of global warming, as well as the efforts being made to mitigate, maintain, and/or preserve the environment, the people, and their culture. There are various causes of global warming, shown here on this slide. However, scientists tend to agree that global warming is directly linked to human activities. Modern society inevitably generates massive amounts of pollution, most of it arising from population concentrations in major cities, manufacturing and transportation activities, burning of fossil fuels for electricity and modern conveniences, as well as popularity of automobiles, boats, and recreational vehicles. The ongoing production and distribution of manufactured goods, coupled with deforestation and expanding development into rural areas, compound this ever-increasing level of air and water pollution. This ever-increasing pollutant load and subsequent impacts of global warming is an emergent cause for concern, especially for those who live in coastal communities. Further, global warming and the dramatic projections of future climate change carry significant uncertainty for many people. This is especially true for the Native peoples of Alaska, where the temperatures have increased at twice the rate of the global average. This has significant impacts on Alaska, where Tom Ravens, a civil engineer with the University of Alaska Anchorage, states, Alaska's tundra can hardly be considered land, rather a giant ice cube suspended in some soil. Rising temperatures caused by global warming is causing the permafrost to melt and the ground to sink underfoot. This melting permafrost has exacerbated floods and erosion in villages and left many coastal villages vulnerable to violent storm surges triggered by global warming. Further, disappearing sea ice has brought the issue of global warming and its destructive storm surges literally to the front door of many Alaska Native peoples' homes, thus creating what Bronin calls a humanitarian crisis for 200 indigenous communities that have inhabited the Arctic for millennia. Some even claim that Shishmaref is literally melting into the ocean. As the ground thaws, giant storm waves rise ominously all around the tiny village of Shishmaref. These massive storm waves have swallowed up hundreds of feet of coastline, washed away the school playground, destroyed numerous boats and subsistence gear, and even decimated multi-million-dollar seawalls built to protect the village from damaging storm surges while they explore efforts to relocate the village. Some houses in Shishmaref that have been occupied for generations are now wilting, buckling, or collapsing on the thawing tundra. Others have simply fallen into the sea as the land beneath them gives way to storm surges. Some houses and even the town's bulk fuel tanks have been relocated to higher ground. As the slide shows here, our company has helped to relocate some of these buildings as the mitigation measures and seawalls have failed, leaving these houses hanging over the cliffs as shown in the slide. Shishmaref, however, is not alone. Numerous villages throughout the Arctic zone and Alaska are feeling the effects of global warming. In fact, a recent Government Accountability Office study found 4 villages, including Shishmaref, to be in imminent danger, and 20 others to have serious problems. Overall, 184 out of 213 Alaska Native villages face some flooding and erosion. The GAO report noted, however, they're unsure how much of this is due to global warming and how much is due to the natural movement of rivers, and the coast is uncertain. One thing we do know for certain is that traditional coastal protection efforts are failing in many of these villages. Despite the millions of dollars spent on gabion seawalls, jetties, and other erosion control and flood relief measures, they are not immune to storm surges. Further, seawalls and other coastal erosion mitigation efforts can drastically alter the natural state of the beach and even deprive people access to the beach. Additionally, seawalls and other coastal erosion measures are only semi-permanent solutions. They routinely need to be monitored, refurbished, reinforced, or even reconstructed, like the one shown on the right from the village of Togiak. For this reason, many mitigation measures are not cost-effective solutions. As these traditional measures continue to fail, many assert that the community relocation is the only permanent solution to protect the inhabitants of these communities. While the prospects of relocating entire villages like Shishmaref, Newtok, and Kivalina are gaining political support, moving an entire village is a lot easier said than done. Aside from the astronomical economic challenge this option poses, there are many other complicating factors associated with moving an entire village. These factors include, but are not necessarily limited to, new land acquisition issues, decommissioning the old village site, burial and sacred land issues, identifying and establishing infrastructure, and environmental impact regulatory and permitting issues, as well as issues pertaining to the health and well-being of the climate refugees. Additionally, no institutional framework exists within the United States for relocating an entire community. As a result, federal, state, local, and tribal government agencies lack not only the legal authority to relocate these communities, but also planning, coordination, and organizational framework to actually make it happen. This relocation process also raises issues of cultural sustainability. Scientists also often fail to conceptualize climate change as anything but a global process detached from social or cultural factors. However, to Native peoples, it is a cultural problem. Native peoples do not always want to move. To the Native people, they're not just losing a piece of land to global warming. They are losing their ancestral home, a part of their history, their memory, their culture. They are losing a part of their identity as a people. Relocation can unravel the very fabric of a community, weaken community institutions and social networks, disrupt subsistence and economic systems, and impact cultural identity and traditional kinship ties within a community. The indigenous peoples of the Arctic zone are at the forefront of this climate change, where the permafrost melts and sea ice gives way to destructive storm surges that erode their homes and villages and threaten their very existence. Global warming is literally prying apart the foundations of their traditional lifestyle. The farther inland a traditional coastal village moves, the harder it will be for them to obtain their traditional foods and resources. This creates food insecurity. Food insecurity is also directly impacted by global warming, as climate change has already dramatically affected the fauna and flora available to Native peoples. It affects every aspect of their subsistence lifestyle. Melting sea ice impacts the availability and accessibility of seals, polar bears, fish, walrus, and whales, and has even altered the migration habits of caribou and certain fish like salmon, char, whitefish, and sturgeon. The warmer weather also affects their traditional means and methods used for hunting and fishing, as well as collecting grasses and berries. As the permafrost melts, for example, the ground softens and sinks, making it harder to navigate for hunters and gatherers. Additionally, conservationists are pushing the government to further limit these subsistence hunting rights in response to declining wildlife populations like polar bear and whales. The Inupiat and Yupik peoples that live there see what's happening year-round. They are ever in tune to the environment, animals, fauna, flora, and ever-changing weather patterns. They observe the environment and react to its ever-changing aura, just as their ancestors have adapted to their ever-changing world. To overcome the challenges of global warming, we must all learn to work together. Although global warming is a global problem, we must realize that the indigenous peoples of the Arctic zone are at the forefront of this change. For this reason, outsiders are just starting to recognize the value of indigenous knowledge in planning and maintaining and preservation of a sustainable future. Ford claims that scientists from all fields could benefit from this traditional knowledge and cooperation with the local peoples. It would be unwise to dismiss the potential contributions of indigenous knowledge. Hence, cooperation and coordination between federal, state, and local agencies, as well as indigenous people, is critical moving forward. It is only through this cooperation, understanding, and shared knowledge systems that we can truly bridge the gap between indigenous peoples, government agencies to achieve sustainable solutions for whatever the future holds. Thanks. That's the end of my presentation. I appreciate you watching. These are my references cited that I used for both the presentation and my report. Thanks again.